Okay, it is October 31st in the year 2013. My name is Gary Houck. I'm the Dean for Instruction and Student Development right now at MCC. And with me is Mr. James Lantz, who is the Administrative Vice President. And we're going to talk about his history with the college and also his perspectives of the history of the college as part of our history project right now. We're looking toward the 50th anniversary of our school in 2015. And we also hope to put these interviews in a time capsule to be opened 50 years later. And I want to explain that back in our era, we were as geeked about the University of Michigan State game as you are now. So that is why we're wearing our colors today. And you can certainly tell who is for which team. And we both project different outcomes for the game on Saturday. So we have a bet going here, too,
You
for
betcha.
an Olive Burger at the Sydney Supper Club, which might be history by the time that you you see this.
It's been going for over 100 years.
It
now,
might
so
still be here, yeah.
Still
Okay,
be there.
good, all right. Well, Jim, let's start by you telling us when you began here at MCC and what was here at that point in time.
Okay. I started here in July of 1986.
Okay.
At that time, on the Sydney campus, we had the administrative library building that we have now.
The one we're in.
The one we're in, but it was flip-flopped. The library, which is currently on the lower level, was on the upper level.
Okay, yeah.
And the offices were on the lower level. Instruction West, Instruction East, the activities building, and what we now call Instruction North, which at that time was the vocational technical building, along with the power plant, were here at that time.
Okay. Now, was North the aviation program when you came, or had that already been?
The aviation program, as I understand it, ended in 1980.
Okay,
and
so it
an
was
auction
down.
was held, and all the equipment was auctioned off. So at that time, the automotive program was actually in the front part of the building.
Okay.
The industrial tool or industrial machine, industrial technology was in the middle of the building. And there was some storage and I think some other technical programming in the back of the building, I believe.
All right, yeah. And the president at that time when you came was?
Don Burns.
Don Burns, okay. He was. That's right, he had just come, I think, 2 years earlier?
Don actually came in 1971. He became president in 1984.
Okay, yeah, okay, yeah, very good. And at that juncture, what would you say would have been the student body size and the faculty size, to the best of your recall?
The faculty size was not a lot different than it is now.
About 30-ish? Okay.
Yeah, maybe a little less, somewhere in the 25 to 30 range. We had, the Montcalm probably more than other community colleges in Michigan for a number of years, had a kind of a core, a cadre of full-time faculty, and then used a greater percentage of adjuncts, and that allowed some flexibility as the community needs changed. You could, hire different adjuncts to provide that kind of education.
Sure. Yeah. Student body wise?
Student body at that point was probably in the, I think a full-time equivalent probably in the 900 range.
Okay. So about half, a little less than half what it is right now.
Yeah, it was quite a bit, it was smaller then. And I think tuition at the time was maybe $25 a
Wow.
hour.
That's pretty nice. So you came before the Dozer building was built.
Yes.
And is that area of grass what would have been called the atrium back at that point in time?
The atrium is the, and it was, although I don't know that I've seen any official record of that, but that's the term that Don explained to me it was called, is the area currently that's kind of in the middle of all the main campus buildings.
Oh, the quad out here.
Yeah, what we might call, U of M we'd call the quad,
right.
Or the diag goes through.
Yeah.
So it was, it's kind of that central campus, and at that time, there were sidewalks that crossed that area. There were small brick patios kind of in each corner of it.
Okay.
There were a few more trees in that area. And so it was designed as a kind of a place for students to gather. Although, in Michigan, the best weather is in the summer where we have the least students,
Sure.
so didn't necessarily serve that purpose a lot. But.
Okay, now I heard that the reason why our teams were called the Centurions was because the atrium term is a Roman term. And so that's how that term was devised. Does that resonate with you?
Yeah, there was some kind of connection, and I think it kind of came from Don Fink, who was the first president. That's my understanding, that he had some kind of an affinity for that, and so the team name and the name for the atrium were kind of something that I believe he came up with.
Okay.
Don would know that better than I.
So we had teams when you came, or were they already
No,
discontinued?
no. The last one was basketball, which also ended in the early 1980s, I believe.
Okay.
Matter of fact, we had an auction to clear out some old storage stuff, probably sometime during the early 90s. And we came across old cheerleading uniforms and things like that.
Wow.
So.
That's great. So the major event that would have occurred during your first year would have been the establishment of Heritage Village.
Yes, one of the first things that Don asked me to do after I came, the Shones had indicated an interest in donating their log home.
Correct.
From Crystal, and he asked me to figure out how to get it here. And so, and more of the credit for actually accomplishing that goes to Frank Reeder, who was our maintenance superintendent at the time.
How do you spell his last name?
Reeder.
Okay,
He's
thanks.
passed away now, but he worked with Big L Lumber, of course. They've been a big supporter of the college for many years, and they provided some manpower and equipment to actually, disassemble the cabin and load it on trucks and bring it over here, and so we could reassemble it.
Now, you're the one, I think, that devised the tagging system when they disassembled it and put it
I
together.
think Frank probably, we talked about it, but I think probably that was more his thought than mine. I talked about some way to, when it became clear that we couldn't move it intact, that it would have to be disassembled, we talked about how we might label so we could reassemble it,
Okay.
which it turned out we couldn't really reassemble it the same
Right.
way because some of the logs were not solid enough for it. But I think between Frank and the folks at Big L, they really came up with that tag
Okay.
system.
But you researched the chinking process.
The chinking, yes, I checked around, and of course, the online resources were pretty sketchy, at that point. But did find a place in Tennessee that had a product called Permachink, which was designed to expand and contract and therefore last longer, and so we got some of that, and that seems to have worked fairly well.
Okay. So you did this basic exploration summer, August, September?
August,
86?
September, yeah.
Okay. And then the school came that fall from the Gatfield Schoolhouse from Amble, and was the first established building, and then the completion of the reconstruction would have been in the spring of the log house?
Yeah, the following summer, we had some of our custodians, a couple of our custodians, Gary Kiefer and, let's see, who else did Ken Bragel work on? No, Gaylord Cooper.
Oh, yeah, Gaylord.
Worked on that. Gaylord had been a Seavey in the Navy, and so was familiar with construction, and Gary was a woodworker, and so they reassembled it.
Okay. Very good, thank you. Now, you mentioned Big L. Is the L for Ken Lehman?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, he founded it.
All right, and I know the trails that we have now are called the Kenneth Lehman Trails. Are they because he established those, or?
Yeah, he was an early member of our foundation board,
Oh,
as
okay.
well as a supporter of the college. And it was kind of to honor him because he, was a big fan of the outdoors, big game hunter, and so it was more to honor his contributions to the college and the foundation that the trails were named for him.
Okay,
And he
gotcha.
provides some money for upkeep and improvement of the nature trails.
Okay, so I guess the lumber for the bridge across the swamp was probably provided by Big L and the
Yeah, I think it came from Big L, and actually Gaylord Cooper constructed it. Yeah.
Sure. Oh, okay, good. And I know Trebian, is it Trebian or Trabian? How do we say that room correctly, the conference room? I've heard both.
Yeah, I've heard both too. I mean,
Okay.
I don't remember. I think Orville pronounced it more Trebian.
Trebian, yeah, okay. And that's named in his honor. I think he's the one who planted a lot of the trees on campus?
He
or-
did plant some of the trees. He owned apple orchards
Okay.
north of Stanton, and he was on the college board. He may have been on the foundation board briefly. I'm not sure, but he was on the college's board for a number of years, and again a strong supporter of the college. And what I understand is in the early days he provided some of the trees to kind of landscape the campus.
And the village as well, I think. I think there's a Trebian orchard over there. In the
Yeah.
village.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah, good. So as you think back over your years here, and it's been how many years? I'm not good with math.
Roughly 27.
27. Okay, so you're now retired, but you're also working here several days a week,
Mhm.
part-time. What are some historical events that occurred here that stick out in your mind, and that for you are major milestones for the school?
There are a variety of things, and some of them occurred before I got here, so other people would be better
Sure.
to talk about those. I think, and since I deal, a lot of my time is spent in the financial
Sure.
and physical plant type
Yep.
areas, though it may tend to stand out.
Sure.
At the time I came here, we were renting a classroom in Greenville. It's, I think, currently some physician's office.
Oh, yeah, on Nelson.
No, this
No?
was
Okay.
on the corner, be the northeast corner of M57 and Maplewood.
Oh,
I think Cherry Street Health Services has an office there
okay.
now.
Mhm.
And at that time it was a Century 21 office and part of it, and we rented a room in that building. And Chris Christensen, who was a computer instructor, he conducted classes there. And then about shortly after I came, we obtained a grant from the state, JTRIF, Job Training and Retraining Investment Fund grant, that we used to renovate what was initially an old body shop at 407 Nelson Drive. It was owned, and may still be owned, by the Jorgensens. We leased it from them at a fairly low, unimproved price, and then we paid for all the renovations to convert it to classrooms and
Wow.
office space.
My gosh.
And we had classes there for a number of years, basically until 2001, when we opened what's now the Stanley and Blanchard Technology and Learning Center.
That we used to call MTech
It used to
until
be
just
called
recently.
MTech, yeah.
Okay.
And that was built with again, a state grant for it came through the local, it's now the Michigan Works Consortium, that Central Area Partnership Consortium at that time. The grant technically went to them to construct the building. And then that, along with some donations, paid for the construction and equipping of that building. That was it opened in 2001. And I guess here on the Sydney campus, the we had done some renovations. We have the farmhouse, well, I guess the farmhouse and barn, which are the two remaining buildings that were original to the property. And the barn was converted to a theater in 1972, long before I came. But we did, around 1990, do some improvements. We did some seating improvements. Later we did a better job of seating improvements to get it to where it is now. But one of the things we did then was some insulation and new heating and added air conditioning, which it had not had, which extended
nice.
the season.
Yeah.
We also did the foundation. Our foundation provided some funds to kind of update the farmhouse, and so we added handicap accessible restrooms.
Was there a room added to that house too?
There was the room in the southeast corner of the house was doubled in size. There was a room there.
Okay.
It was doubled in size, and then on the west side of the house there were two rooms, and the wall between those was taken down to make it one larger room. So, and there were improvements to the kitchen, and just make it a nice meeting place. And our board met out there for many years. And of course the building of the Dozer building, and with each of the construction projects, there's been renovation of existing facilities. In that particular project, in addition to constructing the Dozer building, we made some renovation in the activities building to make better food service facilities. That was also when we redid, at the time, the structural engineers determined that the first floor of this building, the upper floor of this building, did not meet code for a library floor, and
The weight of the books.
yeah, and didn't actually meet the code that was in effect when the building was built in the late '60s. So we decided, since the library, didn't need as much room as it had, and we needed more office space, it just made sense to move the library downstairs and the offices upstairs. So we did that, and there were some other minor renovations to some of the other buildings on campus. And then again, when we did the Stanley P. Ash building, which has nursing and science primarily, again, we did some renovations to Instruction East, Instruction West, and really renovated Instruction North, so that the front half of that houses our art program. So.
Okay, good. So from a human interest perspective, anecdotal maybe opinion here, I have heard via the grapevine that there have been reports that the farmhouse or the barn is haunted.
Really?
Yeah, so evidently you have not heard that.
I have not. Deb would probably be the one. She has an interest in that kind of stuff. I have not heard that, and it's not the kind of thing that I tend to believe in.
Sure, yeah,
So,
I understand. Absolutely.
No, I haven't heard
That's
that.
why I put it around quotation marks. Yeah.
That's interesting.
All right, while we're on opinion also, if I understand correctly, there was some concern expressed by the citizens of Greenville early on in the development of the college and the founding of it, that the school be placed there, or interest, concern, desire to have it in Greenville. And there were two professors from Michigan State University, who were asked to be consultants and suggested the Anderson Farm to be more centrally located in the county, and that some were disappointed in Greenville. From your perspective, has the fact that we have the MTech now, the TLC, and the new Brayman Center in Greenville, has that changed the concern of some of those Greenville community segments?
Well, I think so. I've heard those stories as well, and of course, I think the primary motivation for locating the college more centrally in the county was, besides being able to equally serve all the residents, was practical of trying to get it approved, because at that point, to get the initial millage approved, there was some animosity between Greenville and the rest of the counties, and so it just there would be more support to place it here. I have heard. I think that with the what we called the MTech for a number of years now, the TLC addressed some of that. I think adding the Brayman Building has addressed that to a much greater extent for two reasons. One, it's much more visible. The MTech TLC is kind of tucked back.
Yes, it is.
And wasn't visible. It's a little bit more visible now with Yellow Jacket Drive going through the property. But also our instructional folks, you folks, have made a strong effort to add some classes over there so that students can take many, if not all, of their classes in Greenville. So I think that has certainly helped.
Good. I'm glad to hear that. Yeah. Now, the Anderson farm. Were the Andersons still alive when you came?
Oh yeah. Well, I think the daughters.
Okay.
Because there was at one point when the daughters donated the phonograph that's currently out there.
I love it. It's great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I wasn't personally involved in them, but I was here when that occurred. And there again, Don would probably be able to tell you more, but but I don't believe and I'm not sure when the college purchased the property.
I have that information. I can get it off.
I don't know if Mr. Anderson was still alive at that point either.
I don't think so. I think Mrs. Anderson was the one who negotiated with the college. Was College Drive, if I'm getting my facts straight, was College Drive called Anderson Road at first, or Anderson Drive at first, and then changed to College Drive? Because I've seen the name Anderson Drive associated with the campus. I'm assuming that's what that meant.
Could be. I mean, there's the Anderson Farm Lane, which runs from the barn basically, the paved walkway.
Oh, the paved walkway. Okay.
That was the old farm lane that they'd used to go back to the fields.
Oh, maybe that's.
And we paved that, and that does. If you continued on in a kind of straight northerly direction, it would join in with College Drive.
Okay.
Now I don't know. I know that the college's address, until shortly before I came, was 1464 West Sydney Road.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
And then and then they decided to actually name our driveway, which has always been a public road since it was installed. They decided, and I don't know what it was called before, to tell you the truth, if anything, but they decided to name it College Drive, and we became 2800 College Drive. That was shortly before I came.
Why 2800? Is there some significance to that?
I think the post office or somebody assigns those.
Okay.
Actually, that varies. There is now an addressing authority in the county level that does it for everything but Greenville, and then the city does it for Greenville. Prior to that, I believe it was the phone company or utilities that determined what the addresses were.
Okay, all right. So B. Dozer, was she the chair of the board when you were hired?
Yes.
Okay, and she continued on as chair for many years. And that's when it changed to Karen Carbonelli. Okay. What was B like?
B was very good. Actually, I think if on my first day, when I was hired, I didn't start until July. I think it was maybe the second week of July, probably around middle of July, because we had a vacation planned.
Same thing.
My predecessor retired on June 30th. And so during June, I took a day here and there and would come out and spend some time with him to try and get a little bit of orientation.
Who was that?
That was Homer Anderson.
Okay.
And
no relationship to the Anderson Farm people. Okay.
No, he was from Muskegon. Matter of fact, he still maintained his house in Muskegon, but had a house here and then moved back to Muskegon when he retired.
Okay.
I think it was one of my first days here that B came in and introduced herself and chatted for a bit. I had no idea who she was at the time.
Sure.
But very nice, very welcoming, very very cordial, and that was the first time I met her. I think the thing, I guess, my impression of Bea over the years, you know, she was. I heard some stories of her involvement during the construction. She was, you know, very hands-on,
Oh,
very
sure.
very firm with some of the stuff, and probably that was a good thing, I'd say. But I always thought she was very fair, very even-minded, very even-handed. You know, handled things very professionally, and just, you know, she ran the board well, and you know, interacted with the employees well. She was a very impressive person.
Okay, good. Now, I did hear from, I think, Les Morford that there was a little controversy when she was at the helm of the board of the new money, old money, so-called.
Yeah.
And if I understand correctly, and set the record straight for me if I have this wrong, that earlier in this particular year, and I forget what year it was, the faculty did not receive a raise, and there was a millage increase at that point in time with some new monies coming, and it was promised that that money would be used for campus enhancements, and there were some administrators that the board chose to give some raises to, and B. Dozer and others explained the fact that they used old money for that was not coming out of the newly received funds that were in fact going to go for those projects for which they were earmarked. Is that the correct interpretation?
Les, of course, might have a little bit better handle on that. I was, of course, in the community. I had lived in the community for 10 years before I came to work here.
Okay.
And so I was aware of that discussion. The initial college, one mill, was put in place when the college was established in March of 1965.
Yes.
The next increase, there were some attempts at millage votes, but in the early 80s, but it was 1986, about 2 months before I came, that an additional 3/4 of the mill was voted. That was the first increase.
Oh, that was the first
other
increase.
Than when they built the activities building. At that time, it was prior to the Headley Amendment to the state constitution, so that when they built the activities building, the board could simply decide that they were going to do it and levy the tax to pay for it.
Sure.
But yeah, the new money, old money argument, I don't know if it came from B or not necessarily, but I do recall that, yes, there were some, and probably not to the extent, I'm not recalling, I don't have the knowledge that Les does about it, but there were some administrative raises given, and there were some community questioning of that, and the comment was that, well, that came out of the old money, not the new money, which did not sit well in the community.
Sure, yeah. But I very seldom hear about that in the community, so I think that's a long forgotten exchange. But
Could
it's
be.
an
I mean,
interesting
there are
tidbit.
things like that throughout the history. Actually, I think it was just before I came. The board decided, Don had gone on a vacation to Spain, I believe. And the board decided to give him a raise, and for some reason did it at a special meeting. Didn't specifically, I think they posted it, but didn't specifically call the Daily News and say, "Hey, we're going to have this special meeting." So the Daily News had their nose cut off, and they were upset that they weren't notified of that. So they made a big deal about it. But
And I think I heard from someone that when Don came back, he saw the paper in the airport before he even got home.
he had no idea any of this was going on.
That's great.
And that was before cell phones.
Sure.
To any great degree.
Yeah, cell phones would change
Or
things.
email
quite a
or
bit.
anything,
Yeah,
so.
absolutely. So, millages. Here's what I understand, I think, from what I've been told so far. So again, you can clarify for
Okay.
me and others who are watching this. The time when we were founded, March 2nd of 1965, there evidently was a provision in the state that if a millage was passed, that provided the blessing upon a new institution to become founded, and the monies from the state would supplement the monies that were received by the taxpayers, and then of course there would be the other revenues assembled to make this happen. And then I think that has changed since then, and the whole schema of the millage has changed a bit in its functionality. Am I correct with that?
Well, I think to the extent that, and here again, I'm going based on what I heard from Don and probably from Cliff Bedore,
Okay.
who was the early, I think the first employee that the college actually hired. He had been worked as a consultant with the exploratory group that led to the establishment.
Okay,
of the
sure.
college. But
Yeah.
anyway, the theory, as I understand it, initially was that community college funding would be 1/3 from local property taxes, 1/3 from state money, and 1/3 from tuition and fees.
Okay.
But as state funds dwindled different times over the years as the state economy ebbed and flowed,
Yes.
the local property tax became a greater percentage of the whole, and schools started to look towards additional local property taxes to try and grow and expand as we did, and so there again, so it became a greater piece of the pie. So that now property taxes may be 40%, and the state might be 20%.
Okay,
So.
yeah, that makes sense. Okay, well, thank you. That helps to clarify for me. So, anecdotes. History certainly is the timeline of major events and buildings and leaders, but there are always stories that color the complexion and personality and add some depth and breadth to understanding of any organization. So, as you think back, not even thinking about the fact that 4 out of the last 5 years you had to treat me to a hamburger because Michigan State was victorious over Michigan. But I won't even mention that.
No, I'm glad you wouldn't.
Thank you. Stories of human interest around the campus that pertain to faculty or staff or administrators. Anything come to mind that's just fun for us to know that helps put personality to all this stuff?
Boy. We've had a good group of folks over the years, and people come and go, and,
Sure.
and by and large, we've had some really good folks who have been very involved. I guess there have been probably different things that some are things that I'm not even sure how accurate they are. They shared at our last retirees gathering. Some of those stories that Les or Don or some of those folks would be more knowledgeable about than I would be. I guess one that comes in mind, of course, for a number of years at our annual holiday luncheon,
Yeah.
Les would take on the role of Santa Claus.
Oh,
And basically be the MC.
okay.
But he would encourage one of the things, and probably one of the most looked forward to for a number of years, and maybe later feared portions of the program, was when people would do they might do a skit or some kind of a gag gift or something, good-natured poking fun at coworkers and colleagues and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And so,
Well, still somewhat happens to a certain extent. But
still somewhat happened, not nearly to the extent it did. But
okay, yeah.
there was one year where Don Van Singel was our state representative. He lived from the Grant area, but he covered this area. And we heard through the grapevine that at a recent fundraiser for him, Don and Maureen Burns had dressed up in kind of country western garb and had sung Achy Breaky Heart
Oh my God.
at this gathering.
I can only imagine.
And so we thought, wow, wouldn't it be great to have that at our annual holiday
Oh my
gathering?
gosh, yeah.
I made a few phone calls. I suppose it's safe after these years. At the time, I talked with Don Van Singel personally, and he said, okay, but you didn't get this from me. I think he's probably okay with it after these many years. But he sent me, a videotape of it, and we played that. So that was
that's
fun.
great.
Student services folks were always very good at putting on skits, poking fun at folks, and there were just some good times.
That's wonderful. That's great to hear. Yeah.
Probably the most memorable one for me personally was when I dressed up as an elf.
Was I here for that? I don't remember.
It was
that.
in '93.
Okay, yeah.
It was, we had some failed millage attempts. We had cut some staff, and it was a bit tense. And so, kind of as a tension reliever,
Nice. So that would certainly do it.
Les was Santa Claus, and I came out as his elf assistant.
Yeah, you
Got a few laughs.
You look kind of like an elf,
Yeah.
around the
Yeah,
eyes.
yeah.
That's good. Well, that's awesome. Well, thank you. Anything else that you think posterity would enjoy knowing about the school from your perspective, your experiences here that I haven't asked you?
Not that comes to mind right now. I think the college has grown. One of the things I would say about, and it's not unique to Montcalm, but it's not universal in all community colleges, even in Michigan. The importance of the word community in the name Montcalm Community College. That's always been an emphasis here.
And some schools have dropped that.
Some have dropped it,
Mhm.
and others, even that have it, don't pay a lot of attention to it. And that has been something that has been paramount in the minds of the board members, as well as the administrators and the faculty and the staff here over the years, and I think that's worked well.
Okay, very good. Well, thank you so much. And if I remember correctly, you're projecting a 21-17 victory on Saturday with
For Michigan, yes.
UM over
Yeah.
MSU, and
Pretty
I
much-
project 28-21
pretty much
victory for
guaranteed, I
MSU's.
think.
So we'll see what happens. Thank you, sir.
Okay.
Appreciate it.
Thank
Mr.
you.
James Lantz, our admin VP.